is something that the izquierditas, the leftists, are trying to push here in America as well, which is forget the past.
Before this coronavirus hit, he had the economy booming, and red, yellow, black, and white Americans of all stripes were able to take advantage of American prosperity.
Despite President Trump's common sense approach, Joe Biden and Democrats aren't coming around to the same reality. They want to keep the schools closed.
So this is Joe Biden. This is a man who wants to be president, and he can't find the time in his little video to say he's proud of this country. We've never lived up to it, he says.
I don't think that if Joe Biden was president, we would see these types of gains. It is because of Donald Trump's policies and what he has done to help our country grow again.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor to be here with you and to hear these stories on why the fight for freedom can never be forgotten.
What is happening in our backyard today, I experienced as an 11-year-old at a guy named Castro.
Republicans are the party of freedom, Democrats are the party of socialism and worse.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Women for Trump Empower Hour. I'm Katrina Pierson, advisor to the president's reelection campaign, and tonight I'm joined by the founder of Cynthia, Garrett Ministries and the author of the newly released I Chose Victory, Moving from Victim to Victor, Cynthia Garrett, as well as behavioral health expert in psychiatry and psychology, Dr. Scott Schmidt. Thank you both for joining us this evening.
Hi, Katrina. It's nice to see you.
Well, we're excited to have you both here this evening. There's a lot going on in the world, so let's dive right in. One of the most important issues we're facing across the nation right now is sending our children back to school. Parents need to get back to work to provide for their families, and children need to be back in school with their peers. Let's be honest, the radical left is playing political games with our kids. And they think that keeping kids home will hurt President Trump this November. And Cynthia, what's the end game for Democrats in this push to keep children at home, and how long do you think this will last?
I think the end game is power. To be quite frank with you, I think it's all about power. I raised a bunch of boys, right? One that I birthed, and then a bunch of adopted boys. And then I picked up more and more and more along the way because my son played basketball at a very, very high level, as did his friends and do his friends. And one of the interesting things that I have seen is this violation of a lesson that I taught my boys growing up. Never be a sore loser. When you lose, you brush off your shoulders and you move forward, you reassess your game, you work harder, and you go out prepared to win. Unfortunately, I was a lifelong Democrat before I took the beer goggles off, right? So unfortunately, what I have seen is a party that has been stuck in something that would never be allowed on a field of competition, and that's called being a sore loser. And when you're a sore loser, you don't move forward, you don't offer solutions, you don't reassess your game plan and come back stronger, you just attack the other person. And there's one of my favorite sayings is from Eleanor Roosevelt, and she talks about how great minds discuss ideas, but small minds discuss people. I'm sick and tired of hearing the Democrats only discuss President Trump and not discuss anything else. So the end game here to me is I'm a sore loser. I lost 4 years ago. I'll do anything to win, even if I have to tell you that you can't send your kid to school. And even if statistics say that this is damaging to your kids. Power. It's a power grab.
Yeah, and we're seeing this more and more through the Democrat spectrum, whether it's kids or masks for that matter. And there is something to be said with the negativity, we'll use the word, when it comes to losing and not processing that internally and figuring out how you can be better at something. And so I think that is a huge point to make. And I know I was really hard on my kid, who's now 23, but he was right there in that generation where everybody got a trophy, and I just was adamantly opposed to that. So, Dr. Schmidt, in that vein, as an expert, what are the dangers of having children isolated for such long periods of time?
Yeah, Katrina, it's so damaging. I think that kids, more than anything else, need to develop their social skills. School is more than just a catalyst for learning reading, writing, math, geography, English skills, literature skills. This is a place where they're learning how to socialize. This is the most important fundamental component of school, is learning how to play nice, learning how to have dialogue, learning how to have dissenting opinion in conversations. This starts at a very young age. When a little kid goes and steals candy at the grocery store, mom says, "No, you can't do this. This is the moral right to do." We have these kind of messages throughout our entire time developing. And it really requires peer interaction. And unfortunately, with schools being closed, I've seen it in my own practice, this has been really detrimental to people's health, especially kids, but not just kids, adults too, the parents of these children.
I love what Dr. Schmidt just said about socializing thing, Katrina, if I might add this, because I've noticed when I go out walking in my neighborhood through this pandemic, people go out and they take their dogs to the little doggy park area, right? We know dogs need to be socialized in a dog park to learn to get along and not bite other dogs, right? So I've often stopped and said, are they trying to make our kids like dogs? Like our kids don't need to be socialized, but it's okay to go to a dog park and socialize your dog. Like there's so much of this that's so rooted in hypocrisy and absurdity that I just wonder if the Democrats, honestly, as a party, think that we've lost our minds and that Americans are really stupid.
I do. I think that's exactly what they think. I mean, even if, you've heard the homeschool argument really about, well, there's a lot of people that homeschool their kids. They're home just fine. But the thing is, what they don't know about homeschooled children is that their parents also put them in other activities to socialize them with other children. And so I think it's been truly eye-opening for many people who at least consider to call themselves a Democrat prior to all of this chaos. But, President Trump has met with parents, educators, and medical professionals, and they all agree that it's imperative for our kids to get back in school this fall. But meanwhile, Joe Biden and the Democrats are ignoring that advice and want to do exactly the opposite. So, Cynthia, we were just talking about, do people see through this? Do you think they are seeing through this, or do you think that a lot of people just aren't saying anything, or do they even know what's happening?
Katrina, I think it's a combination of all three. I think a lot of people are so used to being able to trust that, even people who didn't trust government had some level of trust for the government. I think that one of the things that's been incredibly difficult is realizing how egregiously deceptive so much of what our government has been about is really, that's really occurring right now. And so I think that parents, need to understand at this point right now, like it's critical that we understand that this is really about the onward push that exists fundamentally in the Liberal Party to tell you what to do, to control your life. It's about power and control for the elite and those who have over those who don't have. And it's this deception of, well, it's really the Republicans who want that. I have found in my experiences, and it's just not true, and Beyonce made a statement at the BET Awards recently, and she said, you got to vote like your life depends on it. Well, I think that's true. But if you vote like your life depends on it, that means you have to wake up and start looking at what's really going on. And that means you got to be open to the fact that maybe your paradigm has to shift from one way that you've been thinking about, the party that you pledge allegiance to. And sadly, it's huge, there's this huge pledge of allegiance by African Americans to the Democratic Party. And I think you just have to wake up and if you want it, then you should have put a ring on it. And when you've had decades and decades and decades to put a ring on someone and you still haven't, then you have to sing the Janet Jackson song. Okay, liberals, what have you done for me lately? And the answer is literally nothing.
Right, Cynthia, but here's the thing. Maybe someone's paradigm doesn't need to shift. Maybe they just need to open their eyes and see what paradigm is playing out right before you. Because if you're going to vote as your life depends on it, you might want to look around and see what's actually impacting your life and make that decision accordingly. But understandably, there are some parents who, with reason, are worried about their children going back to school. So Dr. Schmidt, what are some precautions that schools or parents should even take to ensure that everyone is safe, even those for the children who may be more vulnerable?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, at the end of the day, you have to weigh the pros and cons. This is how we practice in a professional medical setting. We say, do the risks outweigh the benefits, or do the benefits outweigh the risks? And we really need to measure that wholly. I think a lot of these measures that have been taken to prevent risk, there's some warrant to what we're doing. However, we're introducing so much more risk from other health issues, specifically cardiometabolic disease, which we talked about last week. 650,000 people die a year from cardiometabolic disease, where these are huge, huge numbers, not to mention people not getting cancer care treatments. And for parents, the other thing, there is a risk. We know that we know this from 2008, 2009, during the financial crash, that there was big spikes in stress-related disorders, big spikes in suicide. People, when they have trouble being able to provide for themselves, provide for their families, that introduces a whole gamut of risks. And if we keep people at home from school, well, parents are going to have to stay home too. And when they're staying home, it's not, my sister-in-law stays home with 3 young children, and it's not easy for her to maintain her livelihood, staying home, doing her work. Can she even do her work effectively while she's managing 3 kids at home? Schools play such an important part in that, socially, beyond, again, reading and writing and their own socialization. But it does provide a social structure and net so that it allows adults to go to work. So it's definitely a big concern. I think you look at things on a case-by-case basis. If somebody, when I admit them to the hospital, I say they need to be on this medicine as they were admitted to a hospital, that would be very myopic in terms of how I practice. I have to say, what is this person's unique circumstance? And what treatment does this really warrant, if any? And how are we going to make those interventions? But we never make blanket policies in terms of caring for the health of people that I serve. So I think in the same vein, we'd have to look at things that way. But I'm really concerned of having a virtual classroom. Kids are already disconnected through being on social media for over a decade now. Yeah. We need to make sure we're doing our best to integrate kids as people, not virtually.
That's a great point. I had never considered the fact that this generation coming up has really, their whole lives are already digital. And so they've lost that, person-to-person contact. Even at the dinner table, you see some children still, on their devices. So I think that's probably why things are worse now that they haven't been in school. That's a really great point. And, it is sad and it's unfortunate, but there are a lot of people who are out there trying to get their kids back in school for a whole host of reasons. But we have a candidate in Joe Biden who has sworn allegiance to teachers' unions, not students or parents, teachers' unions, and they want children to stay home. And they're playing into the fear, and they're really pushing this narrative. And they actually have no interest in protecting children because there are no solutions that come along with this. So while the teacher unions are pushing Democrats like Joe Biden and others to adopt these anti-school stance, because that's really what it is here. There's a lot of children who can't even get access to some of the resources that they need. So Cynthia, why don't the unions want the kids back in school?
Well, because I think, unfortunately, unions, which started out for the people, by the people, just like our country, has become about for those in control, for more control, for those at the top, for more money. And that is the problem. Teachers' unions, there are some great teachers out there. I come from a family of educators and teachers, and I think great teachers should be paid more money. The problem is, I don't understand how those great teachers have become as blind as the many great African Americans and African American stories that are bamboozled by this liberal thinking that someone's going to come in from outside in a party and save us. No one's saving teachers. Teachers have to save themselves. And the best way that they can save themselves is to stop believing this rhetoric of these unions that were formed for education, which is about an industrial era. It's not about the future. So teachers really and truly are thinking about themselves. And that's a problem. It's a problem spiritually. It's a problem systemically, if I might use that word. And it's a problem mentally that people have. We've become a nation of victims. Victims they live in blame, they live in anger, and they think only about themselves. When you really and truly do start thinking about other people, you say, I can't tell Dr. Schmidt what to do in his home. I can't tell Katrina what to do in hers. It's his choice whether or not he wants his child to go to school. By the way, it feeds into the bigger passion of mine that I really believe in, is that it's really parents' choice to choose their schools. So all of this really, it's like, I don't understand how we have leaders who think that it's okay to tell us as parents that our kids can go and get an abortion without our consent. Yet we have no right to keep them home from school. It's just, it's completely hypocritical. And again, it's a power grab, and it's what, unfortunately, the Democratic Party is about. Bigger government, bigger control over people and over homes and over families will give you $10 so that you can live on, rather than give you the ability to choose where you want to live and how you make your $10, which is the foundation of capitalism. And globalists hate capitalism. And Biden has been a part of this push for all of that for so long that it's time we wake up and stop being, blind sheep.
Yeah, just that going along to get along sense that seems to be out there. And, Dr. Schmidt mentioned this, there's no one size fits all. But to your point, Cynthia, that's exactly what the Democrats' policies always are. One size fits all healthcare, for example, one size fits all everything for these guys. But the best part about it is I've often wondered why no one in the press ever asked these politicians, if this one size fits all is so great for everyone, are you going to give up your Cadillac insurance and go into the exchange with everyone else? Because that has not happened. So it makes you wonder what would also happen if we continue down this path of one size fits all. And you're right, this is ultimate control of everything. And when someone wants to control everything about everyone else, Dr. Schmidt, that sounds a lot like narcissism.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope for sure. I mean, the same vein, we know what happened to George Floyd, and watching it was really, really terrible. But if we do a one-size-fits-all approach, this is what we see now. We see, defund the police, all police officers are bad. We know that is not true. If we said that about teachers, I'm sure I believe most teachers, I come from a family of educators myself too. I suppose I am an educator myself, I'm a professor at the University of Colorado, but I do know there are some bad apples out there, and there are some bad teachers. We're not talking about defunding teaching, defunding educators.
Maybe we should be.
And we should, but I think it goes back to the point. Unions started out in a really good positive way. We don't want 7-year-old kids turning wrenches at steam factories, right? We want it for pennies on the dollar, but it has transformed into something where it's not about the worker anymore. These unions are really about power and control. So it's definitely a slippery slope. I am baffled by the fact that people time and time again just side with these unions. It's also concerning too, a lot of teachers I'm seeing on social media saying, no, like we shouldn't go back to school because it's unsafe. But in healthcare, I don't hear a lot of my colleagues saying, oh, we shouldn't go to the hospital because it's unsafe. They say we need more preventative measures. We need more protective. We need better testing beforehand. And that's in higher risk populations. Hospitals always have sicker people than in a school. So yeah, that's my take on it, really. But yeah, definitely disturbing trends over the past few months.
Well, thank you both for that insight. And, perhaps maybe taxpayers should have a refund of their property taxes since our kids haven't been in school. And then maybe, just maybe, the elected officials, when the tax revenue begins to drop, will reconsider these types of things. So with that, we are going to take a short break and be right back after this little commercial break. Stay right there.
Seattle's pledged to defund its police department by 50%, even including a proposal to remove 911 dispatchers from police control.
Joe Biden said he's absolutely on board with defunding the police. Listen closely.
Yes, absolutely.
Hello, you've reached 911. I'm sorry that there is no one here to answer your emergency call, but leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Crime will rise significantly.
We know you want to give Donald Trump 4 more years to fight for you in Washington, but he isn't just up against Joe Biden. He's up against the Democrat fundraising machine, and he needs all the help he can get. Don't just assume because his opponent hasn't completed a single sentence that this campaign is over. Crazy things happen, like this woman becoming Speaker of the House. Support the president today by texting Trump to 88022. Donald Trump is counting on every single one of his supporters to text Trump to 88022 now.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
And welcome back to Women for Trump in Power Hour. I'm Katrina Pierson, back with Cynthia Garrett and Dr. Scott Schmidt. Guys, in recent months, Joe Biden has become a vessel for the far left radicals within his party. It's undeniable what this is now. And, it's become more obvious, and now it's actually brought to the forefront of the 2020 election with his new socialist unity platform with Bernie Sanders. So rather than be an advocate for America's children, Joe Biden has become the advocate for radical policies like defunding the police. So Cynthia, what is running through Joe Biden's mind, if we can even ponder that? Because silence is consent with regard to policy. So why is he advocating for these insane far left policies?
Oh, because I think what's running through his mind, Katrina, is how do I win? What do I have to do to win? How do I get in power? And his party is trying to squeeze him into whatever platform they think will work to get him elected. And that's really been Biden's thing all along. Biden was big against anti-busing and integrating our schools back in the 70s. And I don't know why I'm the only one that remembers this, or why I'm the only one who reads his statements, in congressional records, where he's just like, why should we send our white kids over there to their subpar schools? Why should we bring them into our neighborhoods to our schools? Because when they see how the other half lives, they're going to be angry, and they're going to go back to their ghettos angry. Well, guess what? Biden and all of that kind of rhetoric and thinking is why you have these kids now running around with Black Lives Matters banners. And yes, Black Lives Matter, the statement matters, but they have no idea what organization they're pledging allegiance to at all. So they're running around and they hate their own neighborhoods, and they hate your neighborhood too. And it's like Biden, I think really and truly, he's such a puppet at this stage of his life. And it's really sad, because I've often looked at him and thought, this man's had a lot of drama and grief in his life. He should be at home really and truly living out the rest of his life. Instead, he's with this party that's willing to prop him up, open up his eyelids, and tell him the words to speak. And that's what I see when I see him. And it's very, very, very scary, because to me, the only thing running through his mind is, how do I get in power? And if I have to pretend to be on the very far left and change everything that I've said that I believe and am for decades to get there, then I'll do that. And it's just, the only people losing is us. We're losing.
Well, and we've seen that, though, right? I mean, 50 years of Joe Biden's policies, the minority community has taken a hit. The working class has taken a hit, whether you talk about trade. I mean, we don't have enough time in the programs that we have even combined to talk about the number of policies that Joe Biden has advocated for that has destroyed families, who've separated minority children many times permanently from their parents. And the list goes on and on and on. And speaking of advocating for children, as President Trump has done since the beginning, July just happens to be Minority Mental Health Month. And we've seen through experience that keeping minority children at home is very disproportionately impacting, as everything disproportionately impacts minority children. But Dr. Schmidt, what are some of the effects that are actually taking place in keeping minority children home? And could you just explain to us why it's even more essential for minority children to get back in school?
Yeah, I would say it reaches even beyond minority, but those of low socioeconomic status. Right. One thing that schools do provide, is predominantly in inner city schools, is they provide 2 meals a day. And that's a huge, huge burden that parents might have to shoulder if they're teaching kids remotely from home, let alone when will they be able to work? These, again, it's just becomes this issue of we're reducing people's livelihoods. And I think the nutrition too, health behaviors, kids learn from school how to eat healthy because 2 out of their 3 or 4 meals a day are coming from schools. I used to research this at the University of Pennsylvania, and health behaviors are really ingrained during the school setting. And without having structured recess, without having an ability to have these healthy meals multiple times a day, that's where I think specifically inner city youth are at greatest risk. From just a practical standpoint, again, we talk about the socialization. We obviously know that learning the basic reading, writing, fundamental skills are important. But yeah, that is one big piece that I worry about for kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really sad. And, in that same vein, this is the Women for Trump Empower Hour. So let's talk about women, Cynthia. I mean, President Trump has made it his mission to empower women, especially single mothers like myself. Yeah. It's really hard right now for single moms to stay home and teach their children when they are the sole financial provider for their households. So I know that this is also an issue that is very close to you and you're very passionate about it. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to take a few minutes and just discuss with our audience how you see this impacting single parent households.
Katrina, I was a single mom until my son was 15 years old. And I was raised by a single mother. My parents divorced when I was around 13. And I remember the impact of that. And I remember, thank God, I had 2 parents who stayed friends until, one of them went to heaven. But I have such a heart for single moms because I realized something. I worked. I had to work. Sometimes I had to take the work trip because I had to pay for school or I had to pay the bills, right? Sometimes I took the show that I didn't want to take, because I had to. To tell someone you now have to stay at home, and you have to effectively teach your child, which is teaching is not a job you can so easily marginalize. Right. And that's why I don't even understand teachers unions being behind this. They're marginalizing themselves. If it's that easy for us as parents, especially single moms, to stay home and teach our kids, then I really don't need you. And we really should be talking about what I spoke about in my Newsweek op-ed a few weeks ago. Don't defund the police, defund the schools. Give me the money that's allocated to my child and let me choose what school that I should go to. Unless you're thinking that single moms and single parents and poor people are too stupid to choose their own schools for their children. That's what I feel like the very liberal elites are saying to us because they refuse to allow us to control the choices that we want to make for our children. I think that, single moms know a lot about faith, right? Takes a great faith to get through a lot of challenges and a lot of the things that we have to go through and that we have to confront. And I know you get this, And so for me, it becomes really, really, really angering to have someone basically try to play God, judge, and jury for my home and my life. And if you're going to play, if you're going to play God, judge, and jury for my home and my life, then you better be a better God, a better judge, and a better jury. And I don't see anything in years and years and years of my experience, unfortunately, with the Democratic Party that is about anything more than give the people everything they need, throw the sheep some crumbs, but just don't let them get through our private community gates. Keep them out of our neighborhoods. And I've seen too much of the hypocrisy, especially inside of the Hollywood elite system, to sit here and lie to myself and pretend that it's something different when most of the time it's not. And that's not to say that there are bad people who are Democrats. There are some good people, but there are a lot more good people who are misguided by this point today, in my mind, than not. So for single moms, I think it's just outrageous to think that you can burden a single mother with the added burden of now you have to educate your child. We do enough to try to educate our kid. We do enough to try to feed our kids. We do enough to try to build a good life and exemplify values and morals that they should have through our own behavior, without saying stay home. And on top of stay home and educate your kids, that means you don't have a job that you can go to. I know that mothers want schools open because both my sister and my mother have their daycare providers. They've got 20, 30 young children with parents calling them every day saying, are you open this week? Are you going to reopen? My mother's 76. She has a very real sort of reason for kind of going, I need to think about whether or not I should expose myself to this. And, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, Dr. Schmidt and Katrina. So my thing is, Mom, you're 76. If between the 6 of us, we can't figure out how to take care of you, you did something wrong. So, but my sister is a lot younger than that. And my sister's going, I'm healthy. I can reopen. These mothers are going crazy. They want to go to work. They need to go to work. They're inner city, poor single moms, the majority of them. How on earth could people be so desensitized at the top of liberal leadership? I know Joe Biden doesn't really like Black people. And I know that's a statement in a vacuum. You're right. We don't have enough time to unpack the 19 reasons why I say he's a racist and he doesn't care about African Americans. And only someone who doesn't care about African Americans can say, basically, if you don't like me, you're not Black. I mean, that's crazy. But how on earth can they be so desensitized to the fact that single moms especially need to go to work? And if given the choice, a single parent, and most of the parents that I know are saying, hey, let us decide whether or not we're going to expose ourselves to our kids going to school and coming home with COVID-19, which I got a lot of theories about that anyway, because when I follow the science, I'm not so sure. I travel all around America, and in a lot of small towns in America where kids really and truly can return to school, they don't have this problem. It's not the same in Franklin, Tennessee, as it is in, downtown Los Angeles, maybe. Why are we trying to put this one size fits all form of leadership on this nation? It's not about that. Man, don't tell me what to do with me and mine.
It's that whole cherry picking of information that seems to be driving this narrative. We won't get into that, but I will say that a lot of people are very much having their eyes open, and perhaps that is the divine way to wake up this country to see just who these people are, whom they're being governed by and have been for so many decades. Because, it's not just Joe Biden, it's the party in general. They have taken full advantage of minority communities. And yes, they do think that minorities are stupid. You have to think that they are stupid if you don't think that they are incapable of feeding and clothing themselves and taking care of their own children. Dr. Schmidt, do you have any advice for single moms who are dealing with this issue right now?
I would say stay strong, for sure. It's very challenging, and a lot of this is at the behest of what happens on a policy level, truly. But I think it really does need to start with considering reopening schools. that will really leverage people's ability to actually go out, work, and provide for their kids while their kids receive an education. I agree with Cynthia. It's not easy for us to say, oh, even 7th grade algebra, I remember FOIL, I remember that, but it's really difficult to go and sit down and start helping your 7th grader with math. If you have other things on your mind, these are not easy concepts. That's why we need teachers. So it's important that we have kids in school so that they can continue to progress.
Well, especially with the funny math that they have now. I mean, I have a degree in biology. I took calculus-based physics, and I could not help my niece in the 3rd grade do division. They don't do math the same way anymore. She was teaching me this new weird way that they're doing simple division. So I feel horrible for the single moms who are having to try and figure all this out. I mean, I've been there and I've done that, but things are so much more different today than they were back then. So thank you both for that insight as well. And I'd like to get your final thoughts now, but before I do, I want to give our audience several ways to get involved with the Trump campaign, because the election is only a few months away and there's still so much more that you can do from home to ensure 4 more years of President Trump. And first, download the new Trump 2020 campaign app. It is available on Apple and Android, and sign up at armyfortrump.com to get more involved. To stay in touch with the Trump campaign, text Trump to 88022. And to get involved with our wonderful Women for Trump Coalition, text EMPOWER to 88022. And now I'd like to get our guests' final thoughts. Dr. Schmidt, let's start with you. What are your final thoughts for this evening?
Yeah, I think the final thoughts are for women specifically and single mothers, but these are the rocks of a family unit, and it's so important for them to thrive. And finding ways to take care of yourself if you are a single mother, or if you're a mother that's taking care of kids at home, really important to take care of yourself. Find those ways to stress, find healthy outlets, find ways for you to connect with your children. Try to find opportunities in this inopportune time, for sure. And then be advocates, really be critical thinkers, and speak your voices, speak out. I think it's so easy to be silent because the small majority of people, I would actually say majority of people, are making so much noise that it's scary to actually speak our minds. So don't be afraid to vocalize your real concerns, because that's the way that people actually have movements forward. Those are
yeah. If there is ever a time to be bold, it is now. And not being that advocate for your children could cost us everything. Cynthia, what are your final thoughts?
You know, Katrina, I think I often go back to the foundation of this nation, and it really, you know, it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or not. I will say this, though, 90-some-odd% of this nation professes to have faith. And faith is not about being stupid, as I think, unfortunately, a lot of liberals want to paint the crazy cuckoo evangelicals who believe that by faith they won't get COVID. You know, out here in California, Governor Newsom actually said that we shouldn't sing in church. You know, it's almost like, as a mother, if I had, you know, I would slap him in the back of the head like my grandmother used to do me, right? You know, or my brothers, and say, boy, are you stupid? Have you lost your brains? You know, because the reality is that it's really and truly a return to faith that gives people strength to get through difficult circumstances. And we don't have time to go into all of that, but I founded my ministry because I believe that faith makes us better human beings. For me, it's my Christian faith. You know, for a majority of Americans, you know, where is the faith in living in fear? That's what terrorism is about. And I feel like, unfortunately, I turn on this very convenient leftist argument, you know, and it's all about instilling fear in Americans. This disease exists. You are smart enough to have, you know, the balance of faith and medical advice and science on your show. I mean, kudos to you, because I've always believed, and in my study of the Bible, science lines up with the word of God, and the word of God lines up with science. Most people just don't really know that. But my husband and my son are such severe scholars and intellectuals that they pick apart everything until they come to the exact answer. And I always say I dare anybody to argue with either one of them and come out on the other side of what I just said. Science and the Bible line up perfectly. Now, that said, we have to be careful. And, I flew in yesterday. I put my mask on the plane. I get it. But the reality is we're not being told the truth. I'm on a plane with people sitting who don't know each other, sitting 3 by 3 or, 2 by 2. Well, where's the social distancing there in an airplane? I don't see anyone, shutting down the airline industry, but yet we want to go after the smallest group of people, that children. They're not affected by this disease in the same way. Follow the science, we know that. But why? I believe the agenda is and will always be about our children. In the Bible, it says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. That's going to be way out there for some of you, but let me just quickly explain. Our fight's not against each other. Our fight is against evil agendas. It is an evil agenda to try to lock children in their homes and basically start to prey on their mental health. It is an evil agenda to assume that all single and poor parents across this nation even have computers. They don't. Many people don't have cable. Many people don't have internet. There's such a disconnect from the heartbeat of what makes America America. And I saw it when I was living in Kansas and left Hollywood for a good 6 years. And I traveled all through the Midwest for the first time in my life. And my mind was radically open, and it was blown because I met Americans who love this country, and they love this country like I do. And they have faith, and they worked hard. And for the first time in my life, I saw young people who couldn't get a college education, because their parents didn't have the money to do that. And this isn't a black issue or a white issue. This is not a liberal issue or a conservative issue. This is an issue of us walking away from the foundation of faith and greatness that makes us America. And that's why I said, you know what? I got to look at Donald Trump. I got to look at his actions. Permanently funding HBCUs and increasing their budget is a really good action. Prison reform is a really good action. He's done things. Tim Scott tried to offer a police reform bill. We don't need to defund police. Do we need to reform things? Sure. But defunding the police falls back on the communities that need the police the most. Black and brown communities. My mother, who is a lifelong Democrat, looked at me and she said, I want to pick up the phone and I don't want 911 to be a joke. You know what I'm saying? It's
most people won't catch that, but I caught that.
Thank you. Okay, exactly. I grew up in a musical family as well. So a lot of my references will always go back to music in some form or fashion, But it's come on, I'm only opening my voice and using my mouth because I really care about my nation, and I care about my son and what my grandkids are going to get. And we've got to radically look at our conservative values and re-embrace the faith that we claim that we are and we have. And we've dropped the ball in that way. We have.
We did. I think it's time that we come back. The American spirit is alive and well. And I think that a lot of people are now, doing what they're supposed to do as American citizens, and that is to hold your government accountable. And all politics starts local. And I think people are really understanding what that phrase means now and how important it is to look at home before you look at the presidency, and blame someone who's only been in politics for the last 4 years, and instead looking at those who've been in politics and actually controlling your life for the last 4 decades. So thank you both so much for joining us this evening. And I want to thank everyone at home for tuning in tonight, and check out our online schedule for the next episode of Women for Trump Empower Hour and the other Team Trump online broadcasts. And remember, we have to bypass the fake news media. So please like and share our programs across all social media platforms. And until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you next time.